Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Feeling the Crunch from COVID, Get Tips to Build Processes to Support Change. We're going to be looking at some different processes and tools here to help support your practice moving forward, talking a little bit about how to implement processes to help you during difficult times like this, where change obviously is inevitable. I'm joined today by Dr. David Gates. I'll do some introductions here in just a minute, but first we just want to hit on a couple of quick housekeeping items. The big one being asking questions. So if you have any questions, please ask them as we go along. We will stop and take some short breaks for question answering throughout the presentation. If you're having any technical issues, this is also a good place to put those, and we'll try to address those behind the scenes. So just click on the little arrow next to questions, drop your question in there, and we'll do our best to get to all of those or address them behind the scenes if we can. I'd also like to encourage you to connect with Solution Reach on social media. It's just a great way to stay up to date on what is going on in kind of the practice marketing, patient engagement, patient communication space. We do share a lot of our own educational content as well as content coming from experts throughout the industry, so it's a good way just to kind of keep up to date on things, or events like this one, we promote those there as well. If you are currently a Solution Reach customer and you have any support questions, this is not a great place to put those. It'll take us longer to get back to you. Better to go to community.solutionreach.com and click on My Support, or enter your questions in our search bar and see if something comes up in our knowledge base. You can also email community@solutionreach.com. All right, so I want to introduce you to Dr. Gates, who is our speaker today. He has been practicing for quite some time at a top cosmetic and implant practice in Las Vegas. He does quite a bit of speaking and presenting, works closely with Align as an Align faculty member, has been voted a top speaker with Invisalign. He is a winner. I guess I'm getting tired of the heat. I'm misspeaking. Winner of Dentistry's Next Top Speaker competition. So we're really glad to have him here today. He's got a lot of great insights. He is a great presenter. And I am joining him as your facilitator, and I will be facilitating questions and kind of talking behind the scenes. My name is Leah Chatham. I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at Solution Reach. I've been working in healthcare and health IT and the patient engagement, marketing, practice management space for over 20 years. So I've now surpassed nearly, and I'm happy to add any insights if I can. Before I hand it over, we do want to just do a quick poll. Dr. Gates was interested in just having a sense of who is on our webinar today. So this is just one asking you to share with us what is your role. Hopefully we've kind of been general enough to sort of cover all the areas, but if your role is not here, just pick the one that's closest. And we'll just kind of give Dr. Gates a sense of who he's talking to today, which is always really helpful. Generally like to give about 30 seconds and make sure we get to somewhere between 50 and 75% of you sharing that information with us, so that he can kind of see that, and I'll share it out with you too, so you can sort of see who else is on the call. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to close that, and I'll share it so that everybody can see it. It looks like we are a little less than 50-50 providers and hygienists or assistants, with a small portion of folks in office management or office staffing roles. So there you go. I hope that's helpful, Dr. Gates. We'll be doing a couple other polls as we go along today, and I'll push those out as Dr. Gates is ready. I am going to hand this over to him. Give me just 1 second. All right, changing our presenter. It should be coming over to you to share your screen.
How about that? Will that work? Now do it.
It did it. That looks great.
Great. Well, welcome to you all. I see there's about 85 so far here, and I'm here in Las Vegas, where it was 115 degrees in the last 2 days. So we hope that you're a little bit more comfortable than we've been in Las Vegas, but it is a beautiful day today. And I've been in practice almost 35 years. And one of my favorite things to talk about is systems, because I think systems help us to do our job a lot better. We're here to talk a little bit about technology, and I'm quite delighted to hear that half of you almost are actually providers. As I prepared, I thought to myself it would be nice if the half of you were dentists or providers. I see that we've got a lot of hygienists here, so actually this will be more relevant than maybe I was hoping. Now, the most important thing about you spending 45 minutes or an hour with us today is what you will do as a result of being here. The nice thing, of course, is that you get some CE credit, but I would like to invite you to write down from our discussion today at least one thing that you will do as a result of being on this seminar today. I'm hoping to give you 20 things that you could do, but I would like to invite you to write down at least one thing that you will do better, or one thing that you'll do to change, or one thing you'll do to act. We're going to talk about technology as it relates to COVID, and I remember very distinctly on March 14th, I had found out through our state and through the board that I would be shutting down my practice. You were in that same situation. And I remember that I did not go to work all that next week from Monday the 16th for that next week, but I consider myself very, very blessed. I don't know what your situation was, but I was only out of work for 1 week. And then our governor in Nevada deemed that dental offices were an essential service, and so I got to go back, but only for emergencies. And so I sat in my office for that next 3 weeks. That's not true, a little bit more than that, because we officially opened in May. So I was in my office about 5 weeks. And during all of that time, I was thinking to myself, what systems do I need to put into place now with all of these restrictions that are going to be taking place? The parking lots, the fewer chairs in the reception room, no overlapping. Those were systems that I had pretty well in place over 35 years that were now snatched from me. So I thought about all the systems that I could improve. And ultimately, I still had to get patients to say yes to treatment, even though I was jumping through a whole lot of new hoops. So I'd like to talk about 3 of those technologies with you and those systems in hopes that you can apply something better to be efficient in COVID. I don't know how long we'll have these restrictions. You don't know that, and I don't know that, but we're working with what we have. Now, I think in my office now today, in August, we have a very high level of efficiency. And I consider myself very blessed and fortunate because July was the highest month of production that I've had in my career. That's amazing to me under those circumstances. I'm hoping the things we talk about today apply and into that efficiency. And August is looking like maybe able to break that or be close to what that is. Let's talk about cameras today. Let's talk about note templates, and let's talk about scanners. Okay, camera. In a second, I'm going to ask you how many of you have cameras, and I assume it's going to be very high. I'm hoping to get you to use your camera more efficiently, that you get more yeses out of your treatment. And I hope to give you a little different paradigm on how you're using them. I view cameras as being my third eye. It can and often does help me to see things that I can't see easily just with my loupes or my own eyes. I'm going to talk about using it as a solution for patients to say yes, and I'm going to give you some rules that I consider to be essential and how I use it, why I use it, and how to use it more effectively. And you're going to hopefully see some amusing things that you may be doing in your office that you could stop doing and that will produce better results for you. Now, I only have one slide today that I'm going to read to you, and it's this one. And you'll feel very smart because you'll know a little bit more about it than you did before. The first real intraoral camera was introduced in the late 80s, Fuji Optical Systems. They received the registered trademark of dental intraoral camera on 7th of July, 1987. I'd been out in practice about 9 months when this happened, almost a year. And they released Dental Cam. Later in 1989, Video Dental Concepts launched a novel IOC device that uses dental endoscopic handpiece. It had a dental endoscope, a light source, and a remote head micro camera. Subsequently, many manufacturers modified and enhanced the features that resulted in sophisticated high-end intraoral cameras. Now, don't you feel smarter than you did when you first came here? Now, initial IOC devices were cumbersome, bulky, expensive, and occupied substantial space in the dental office. They had handpiece, video processor, dedicated computer to process the images and video that were captured through the devices. Today, that's all changed. Currently, IOC is a small handheld device which is ergonomic, lightweight, comfortable to use, relatively inexpensive, and can capture high-quality images. Videos that are readily available for the patient and clinician can be magnified and viewed. It's the only slide I'm going to read to you today in our presentation, but that's how we got to where we were. Now, what I'd like to invite you to do is I'd like to take another little quick poll that relates to whether or not you have an intraoral camera in your office. I'm going to be very surprised if this doesn't turn out to be most of you. If you are one that doesn't have a camera, then I'm going to be very emphatic on the need for you to get one as part of your practice. Okay, let's go ahead with that poll. Do you have an intraoral camera? Yes or no? Let's see how we do. We'll give you about 15 seconds to answer that.
Okay, I think we've got a pretty good cross section here. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I will share out the results.
There we go. Okay, I was hoping that would be the case. I am actually surprised. I was thinking it would be closer to 90. Now, I recognize that there's an investment in there, but of all the things that I have in my office that are technology related, none that the patient comments as much on as an intraoral camera. I got my first intraoral camera in 1994. It was a tabletop device. We had a little cart. The processor was laid horizontally like a little miniature briefcase with the hand piece at the edge and a cord draping down, and then a small television on top of that. And I came to love that device. Patients commented it back then. Now my system is much more sophisticated, and of all the things that I do, that's the one they comment on the most. So I hope to be persuasive. Now I'm going to give you some suggestions. There's many cameras out there, but let's talk for just a second, if we could, about some ways to use that. Now, here's my little list of the top 5, perhaps. There's, I suppose, 100. Focus Dent is a big seller. Image Master HD is my personal favorite. Apexel Wireless is a good one. DariU is very popular, and ProDent intraoral camera. All of them have really good images. All of them are USB jack in and so forth. I'm going to describe some features in the one that I have that I like quite a bit, and I'm going to certainly recommend that to you because it has all the features I'm going to describe, but there are many cameras. Let's take a look at 9 rules for using intraoral cameras effectively. Now, 80% of you have them. Some of you will not have the features that I'm going to describe. If you're going to upgrade at some point, then you might want to consider that. But for sure, I want you to, those of you who have them, I want you to use them better. Let's look at 9 rules for using intraoral cameras effectively. First of all, make your camera's physical setup as simple as possible. I don't know how many dental offices I've been in, but probably scores of dental offices. There was a period of my career when I would call up dentists and say, hey, can I look over your shoulder? Can I come in and watch you? And I got a chance to watch some of the best of the best. I went to Gordon Christensen's office. I've been to many of the offices of people that you've heard of, and I've learned a ton from those. And some offices look like a jungle, and some of them look so beautifully pristine, clean, and organized. So I know that that's related to the way that your own brain works, and nobody's going to talk you out of being a cluttered person if you're cluttered, or a clean person if you're clean. But I'm going to recommend that you make your camera's physical setup as simple as possible. I love an environment that's very clean, very clutter-free. That's just the way that my head works. So I'm going to suggest to you that you make your camera as accessible and convenient as you possibly can. I've been in many offices where they are jumping all over the place. They got to go from room to room. They got to drag the card in. They got to drag the laptop in. It makes it so difficult to use. Now, I recognize that part of that is expense. In my office, we have 6 operatories, and I have a camera in each operatory ready to go. So I'm going to suggest that you make your camera as accessible and convenient as you possibly can. If you can only afford one camera, then make that one camera where you're the most often or where your new patients go. I think it's essential that your hygienists have cameras immediately available to them. Now, we did have one camera between 2 hygienists for many years, and I recognize that that wasn't as good as the system we have now, where everybody has a camera. So I want you not to have to decide whether it's worth it to access the camera or not. There's going to be some effort if you have to go into the next room. You might say, forget it. I'm not going to bother with that now. I want to invite you to not have to decide. You just have to reach. It's right there, convenient for you. Now, when you set up your camera, I set up my office. I've been in 3 offices in Las Vegas. I counted up the number of configurations of dental practices that I've been in my career, and I've been in 10 different arrangements in different buildings in 2 different states, in 5 different offices, with associates, without associates. I have an associate now. I've had no associate for many years in my career. Everyone's situation is different, but I would like to ask you to put your camera as close to your dental chair as possible. And most cameras will connect today with a USB, so you have to figure out somehow where that's going to be connected. When I built my current office 10 years ago, I made that a big point of the design, was how to get my camera instantly accessible and how to set it up so that as the technology evolved, I would be able to evolve easily with it. And of course, that includes figuring out how you're going to connect your camera to your computer. In my office, like this one, this is not my office, but it has the computer behind it. And then the computer behind it, that's all in each of our operatories, the computers behind it, except in the hygiene rooms. And all of them are connected up to that so that they can be, the image can be captured in the, on the computer. And so you have to figure out how you're going to work that out so that you don't have wires hanging around or you have to unplug or replug. It's convenience that's the most important thing on making that work easily and smoothly. And I like to not have to fumble around with stuff. I like everything as smooth as I can, because dentistry on its own is complicated enough and physically challenging enough that I want the environment to be as convenient and hassle-free as I can possibly get it. And then today, with today's technology, it's very easy because you can connect your big screen TV with Bluetooth. So there's my little lightning bolt that goes from the computer to the screen. Now, the dental companies will provide a bazillion different ways to set things up, and you have to decide what works best for your physical environment. I'll make a couple of suggestions about that. But at any rate, Fire TV Stick is a very good one for connecting with Bluetooth, so you don't have to have any cables. That's one of many. You can go down to your local electronics store or look online, and there's a zillion of them. In my own home, we use the casting with the chromoscope, and so it's easy to just plug that into the back of the TV and then have the Bluetooth connect that. But in any case, what you're trying to do is not distract the patient. You want them focused on what you're seeing in the mouth as easy as possible. Now, there's the Fire TV Stick. That's one of many, but it just makes things convenient. And I think if you haven't done so, if you don't have a television, if you're one of those 20% that don't have an intra-oral camera, I would like to be as emphatic and persuasive as I possibly can for you to get one. The one that I mentioned to you that I use that I quite like, and they're in a company out of California called Imagen. It's like Imagine with no E on the end. Imagen Systems in Belmont, California. I quite like them, and they will help you set it up from top to bottom with the features that I'm going to describe. Now, rule number 3, make your display image as large as you possibly can. Now, I like having it in front of the patient, and I'll show you why in a second. I don't like the overhead version. I'll tell you why in a second. But look at this image on the wall. Now, imagine this image on the wall. You see, that is so much better. The televisions are not that expensive, and getting one a little bit bigger is not that big a deal for cost. Get the largest one that'll fit in your room without tripping over it. I like them mounted on the wall or mounted from the ceiling. We've done different iterations, but we have the largest and sleekest now that we've ever had. You are trying to have impact on your patient by demonstrating the nature of the problem that you can solve. So that one thing, if you have a choice, make it big, make it right in front of the patient. Now, position the display where the patient can easily see what's on the screen. I'm going to show you some amusing examples in a second where they've done the opposite. It's cumbersome, it's clumsy, the patient can't see. You look at these pictures with the result of your system. Now, my cardinal rule is I stand behind the patient where we can both see at the same time. I always stand behind the patient, and I always sit the patient upright for them to view their images. Now, I did show you a picture of my associate, Dr. Parker, a minute ago, and he had the patient down. Now, if I'm in the middle of a crown prep and I'm taking an image for the purposes of insurance, then this is not what we're talking about. I'm talking about diagnosis and treatment planning when the patient's always upright. So I stand behind the patient in a very relaxed position, and they see everything I see as we go. That's different than if you're in the middle of a treatment and you're going to take a picture of additional decay. That's different than if you're working with the patient, you're going to take a picture for the purposes of insurance. So always sit the patient upright to view their images. So now from over my shoulder, we're both looking at the same thing at the same time, and they're upright. Why do I emphasize upright? You should never ask a patient to make substantial decisions when they're laying down. One of the phrases we use at Align Technology is bibs off. Get the bib off when the patient is making decisions. Now, you can't do that all the time, because if a patient has extra decay that you discovered that didn't show up on the x-ray when you're prepping, then you reach over, show it to them on the camera while they're laying down. I totally understand that there are times for that, but here I'm talking about treatment plan and diagnosis. Never discuss treatment with the patient laying down. You always sit them up. Now, I don't always take the bib off, but I don't leave the bib on when it's time to make some decisions about treatment planning and financial decisions particularly. Now, like you, my financial decisions are mostly made in the consultation room. But there are times when the patient comes in with a broken something and I've got to fix it right now. I sit them up, we look at the pictures together, then they make the diagnosis or the treatment plan, and then we tell them the cost while they're sitting up not with the bib off, if they've already got the bib on, of course. But then they make a financial decision. Yes, go ahead, and off we go. So never discuss treatment with the patient lying down when it's a new patient, when you're doing your initial consultation, your initial exam. Okay, now here is some humorous examples of not following that rule in particular. They can't see a thing, she says. That's because the camera is behind. What was the doctor thinking? The purpose of that is really for the benefit of the patient, although in my head, it's for my benefit. So it's obviously for both, and she can't see a darn thing. Now, here's another one. Don't do this. Don't set yourself up so the patient has no idea what you're looking at, because then you lose 3/4 of the benefit of the patient seeing the intra-oral camera. Don't do that. Here's another one. Oh, my aching back. Look at that. That's about the clumsiest version I can think of. You got the laptop sitting there. The patient can see that. The assistant can't. Oh, I have to wonder, why is it we've got a camera in the corner, or a screen in the corner that they're not using when the patient's sitting up and she could be standing behind her? And also, why is it right behind the pole? That was not really great strategy of a place to put a tiny, tiny TV. Maybe they realize, wow, this is so small and it's behind the pole. No wonder we don't use it. Take a look at this. The assistant and the doctor can both see easily, but the patient can't see very easily. Don't do that. You got to set it up so that it's as simple and ergonomic and convenient as it possibly can be. If you have to go and restructure a few things in your room, might be worth it to think about. Rule number 6, I learned this rule because we taught a course in my office in which a whole bunch of assistants came. And those assistants, it's true they were using my camera and not theirs, but it was like watching off of a roller coaster. They were all over the place. The images were flying around. They couldn't stay steady. It was so uncomfortable for them to be in the patient's mouth with the camera. It was shaking all over. I had a dozen ones do that. Our job was to train them to be slow and steady. So rule number 6 is use a finger rest to produce a slow, steady, tooth by tooth tour of the mouth. I would never just hold the wand and poke it in the patient's mouth. I'm always going, this is looking upward. So I've got a finger rest on the bicuspids on the right with my ring finger. And here, looking down, I also have my ring finger against the patient's tooth so I can be very slow, very steady, very deliberate. You practice in a team meeting. In our team meetings, we have a 2-hour team meeting every other week, and we practice all of these skills again and again and again. We practice our financial discussions. We practice our handoffs between assistant and dentist. We practice our intra-oral camera. We practice impressions. We practice model pouring. All of those things are skills that we should be really fine-tuning all the time. Okay, now here you see he's using a good finger rest. He's being to the side of her. Don't want to split hairs on that, but the assistant can then point to the screen. I'm going to show you in a minute an even easier way to do that. Here you see this nice relaxed finger rest. He can be very steady. I would prefer he didn't have to crink his neck backward, and hopefully the patient can see that, but this picture is really for the finger rest and not for his position. Now here, this makes no sense to me at all. I bet you if we were all standing there looking over the patient, we'd see her shaking like crazy. Her ability to hold that wand that far back and get a good image on top of that tooth, holding it in space, not very likely. Maybe she's got some muscular magical skills that I'm not aware of, but I would be surprised if she could get a good steady image on that for the whole mouth. Don't do that. I also want to make sure, rule number 7, make sure that each of your hygienists has and is trained in the intra-oral camera. And there you see her pointing, and I'm amused at that. I'm pretty sure that was a staged shot because nobody in my mind as a human being could possibly get a good steady image when they're holding the camera like that. And my favorite one is the next one. The hygienist, now you see she's down, so the patient can't see that image, but she's trying hard. My message on this is make sure that your hygienists have cameras and they can use them to show the conditions in the mouth. Then here's a funny one. Check out that wrist position with the left hand. As she points, they're all having a great time. That patient's smiling away. I just think that's the most hilarious photograph of that hygienist making the most cumbersome way to show intra-oral cameras. Okay, applications on them. This might be a little putting the toe in the water for you to be aware of some technology that might be available if you're considering being one of those 20% that doesn't have a camera. This is also my favorite one, the Image Master HD, and I want to tell you a little bit about some of its capabilities, but it applies to many cameras. The most important is the camera all on its own, a crystal clear, fabulous, huge image that you display on a big screen. They use a robust 4K ultra high resolution for the purposes of diagnostics, cosmetics, and treatment planning. Now, here's some that you may not be aware of, and that is that choose a camera that has an arrow to point to the image so you can communicate to the patient without leaving the patient's mouth. When you say, hey, look at that crack there, and they can't see where to look, or hey, look at that fistula there, or hey, look at that abfraction, or whatever it is you're showing. So pick one that has an arrow. Now, I've colored this arrow red. On my camera, it's actually white. I just colored it red so you could see that I can point to that, and I can move the image slightly, and it will move to the arrow. The arrow on mine is on the screen. So I can always point to what I need to, and I don't have to leave the mouth. I can say, now look at this, and look at this, and I can move that. Okay, now let me features that you may not be aware of, and one is transillumination. If you can get a camera that's got a transillumination head or an ear, nose, and throat, I don't use it on the ear or the nose, but I certainly want to know what's going on in the throat, and then also the cancer screening. Those are all things that are in the technology of today in 2020 can be combined into one intra-oral camera. For years and years and years, not years and years and years, but for several years, I think 8 years, I've used the Velscope, and maybe you use that too. But in any case, that's a feature that can be on the camera. Now, let me just show you a couple of those quickly. Trans-illumination is, and you put that cover on there, and then you get this, where you can see those cool cracks that you want the patient to be aware of. And they show up in a really dramatic, dynamic way. Check this out. You can see that, but not as well. But when it comes to that crack, you can tell that story much more effectively. And the lateral lighting increases visibility, making sure you can see stuff. As I said at the beginning, that's your third eye. Check that out. That is a fantastic fracture line that you can see in a way that you just can't quite see. And you want the patient to draw their own conclusions. You don't want to stuff it down their throat. You want them to draw their own conclusions. I think there's a certain finesse associated with the dialogue of that. Okay, so that's to use it for the throat. And I like this. It's an ENT attachment for the benefit of looking in the throat. I quite like that the head looks a little bit like this and goes right over there so that you can see things that you couldn't see. We're responsible for everything in the oral cavity. I don't do nose and I don't do ear, but I certainly do throat. And then the view is the cancer screening, which is like a scope. Again, for that, and then you can use it for frontline caries detection. Here's two necessarily with your own eye. This is the normal, and this is what it looks like with that attachment on there. It works just like a bell scope, but then you have one less device to manage. And if I could do everything in my office with one device or two devices or three devices, boy, I'd be happy. Right now we have 50 devices. And so the more I can combine those together, the better I like that. The simpler my life becomes if I don't have a bunch of stuff to manage. Okay, so you get the idea. The vascularity is difficult to see there. Lymphoid aggregates are difficult to see, but under that light, they just jump out at you. So you're a better diagnostician, and because it's on your camera, you can instantly photograph that and put that in the patient's record without having to get your camera out, without having to get the camera and hook it to the Bell scope. All of those things were things that we did in the past. Okay. Recap on those 9. 1, make your physical setup as simple as possible, physically simple, and make sure that each hygienist has an intra-oral camera. Number 2, make your camera as accessible and convenient as you possibly can. Number 3, sorry about that. Let's click that one. Number 3, make your display image as large as you possibly can. Number 4, position the patient where they can easily see what is displayed on the screen. Number 5, stand behind the patient where you can both see easily, sit them upright, make the patient have the patient make decisions when they're upright, not when they're laying down. Maybe it's because their brain goes to mush when they're laying down, I'm not sure. 6, use a finger rest to produce a slow, steady tooth by tooth tour of the mouth. That's particularly true of new patients or patients that come in with some problem that they want to discuss with you. Number 7, make sure that each of your hygienists is trained to use the intraoral camera. Choose a camera. For those of you who are going to upgrade, or those of you who are going to buy a camera, which I hope I've been persuasive, choose a camera that has an arrow that points to the images so you can communicate with the patient without leaving the patient's mouth. And last is your assistant must be able to freeze any image at any time to be included in the patient's chart for insurance purposes or for a record of what's going on. Now, let me just hit 2 other things about that before we leave this issue. I've taken just a hair more time on this one, but I think it's a very useful one. Ways to better use your intraoral camera. You've thought about these. I'm just putting them in another framework for you. The new patient tour of the mouth, it's what I always start out with. Actually, that's only partly true. I look at the x-rays first so that I can assess in my mind what I'm going to be seeing. And then I sit the patient up, stand behind them, give them a very slow, steady tour of the mouth and freeze whatever I need to freeze on the camera. Slow and steady, capture images needed. Number 2, you can use this and should use this for the new patient perio exam. I finally mastered the skill, not mastered the skill, but got the skill of being able to show the patient in the camera while I'm doing a perio probe pocket reading. Oh, Was that ever useful to me to be able to show bleeding? I show it on the camera. They see it now. The perioprobe looks like a telephone pole. It goes down into the sulcus gently, and then the bleeding starts. Wow, is that ever powerful? Show occlusal wear. You're giving them reasons to take action. I'm giving you reasons to take action. You need to be giving them reasons to take action. 4, display abfractions. I always turn the camera to the edge so they can see that sharp top edge, the sharp incisal edge of the abfraction or open margins. Your 2 problems you've identified in the mouth. Show changes or improvements after a perio program is completed. Give them reasons to celebrate. And then present a better case because you've had images, because the patient has seen it, simple and straightforward. I try to make sure that the computer eliminates confusion, not creates confusion. I ask myself this question when I'm presenting a case. Will anything I say create confusion in the patient's mind? Because confused patients don't buy. So present a better case. If they are confused, it's probably because of something I've said or shown them that created confusion that I didn't simplify for them. I don't give my patients 10 choices. I don't give them 3 choices. Occasionally, I give them 2 choices, but I emphasize this is the best and this is what you should do if you can. You might want to jot that phrase down. It's one of my more useful ones that I learned from Pete Dawson. This is what you should do if you can. If I was going to need an appendectomy, I wouldn't want the doctor to give me 4 choices. I would want him to tell me what I should do in a simple and straightforward way. You need to have your appendix out. Mrs. Jones, you need an implant. And then give them reasons why that's true, but don't confuse them. And number 7, this is if the patient's laying down and you're in the middle of a treatment and you detect, for example, interproximal decay during the treatment on the X-ray that you didn't see on the X-ray. And so you say, Mrs. Jones, we've just seen this decay. I always am careful to say, I couldn't see this on the X-ray, but it shows up now. Here it is. Should we go ahead and do this? Here's the cost. Okay, one last thing, and that is that intraoral cameras should build trust. That's what we're trying to accomplish, is to use them to trust. So here's the paradigm. Is the camera, are the images for you or are they for them? The answer, of course, is both, but I want to have it in my head that I'm not using the camera to show off or to show them what they need. I'm using it as a diagnostic tool for me, and they are simply an observer watching me diagnose accurately and meticulously. When I have that paradigm, they say yes more often, I think. I don't think that I'm here to say to them, hey, looky here, look at this crack you've got. I'm looking at to show me what they've got in their mouth. So I make these 4 suggestions. Show them the good things in their mouth and compliment the previous dentist on what good dentistry in the mouth is wherever possible. 2, the camera should be a tool to show the dentist what is in the mouth more than to show the patient what is in the mouth. They both have to see it, but I like to have the window that it's for me to diagnose accurately so I can do my job better, and you get a front row seat in watching me diagnose. Let the patient come to their own conclusions wherever possible. Hey, that ought to be fixed, right? Hey, that's going to cause trouble in the future, right? That's what I'm hoping I will draw them to say. And then print off 1 or 2 of the most urgent conditions that they can take home with them as needed. If the patient is in, yes, let's go, then I don't do that. If the patient is in hesitation or worse yet, denial, then I do. Okay, now let's take any questions. Leah's going to host this part for any questions that we should address. And also, Leah, what's our stop time, if you would?
So we are down to 20 minutes left. We don't currently have any questions we need to address right now. So maybe we can just move on to the next section, and then if questions come up, we'll get to them in the next break.
That's perfect. I'll do that. And for those of you who have that that dial in front of you, you can just type those in there, and then Leah will feed those to me. So if you have questions that come up afterward, go right ahead. Now, I'd like to move on to my second section. Because of our 20 minutes, this one's another vital one. And if I had to pick the two that I have time for, they would be these two. I want to talk templates, because this is one of the things that I spent much of my time when I was in COVID, in quarantine without patients, refining. And it has produced big, big dividends. Now, there's a ton of softwares out there, and I don't know all of them, and I certainly don't know the ones that you have. And if we took a poll, which we're not going to do yet, I certainly wouldn't know many of them. But here's the list of a lot of them. There's a big list here. You know, there's about 60 here. And I've been familiar with Computer Age. I've been familiar with Dentrix, which I use now. I've been familiar with EagleSoft, which we used for many years. I've also got some familiarity, a little less, with PracticeWorks and with SoftDent. So I have some experience, but I'm going to show you the notes template. And I'm just going to assume, I don't know that it's true, that all of these have some variation of that. Now, I know that there's the big four, and all of those have some variation of this template issue. So I would like to ask you a couple of quick questions. But as it relates to COVID, COVID made it essential for us to increase and maintain our efficiency. So of all the systems and processes that I could recommend to you, this one is one that's going to be big savings. Now, I have been had the experience of watching other dentists write notes. And some of them write very comprehensive notes. And we use our notes a lot. We go back and refer to our notes a lot. But I've been with doctors looking over their shoulder where they write one sentence on the whole thing. And I think to myself, I hope you don't get in trouble where you have to reconstruct what happened in the operatory. In 35 years, I've certainly had a few people make some complaints to me. Most of them I felt were totally unjustified. And of those, I don't know, half a dozen or maybe a dozen that I thought were totally unjustified, I buried them. I wrote to the board and told them what happened and showed them my notes and my pictures, and they were all dismissed as being illegitimate complaints because of my notes. One major way to do this is to make good use of clinical notes templates. The stuff you have to write again and again and again can be done for you. The way I look at it is that the computer is supposed to help me to do my work better. And I've got some good computers, and those computers are very smart, and I need to harness them so they do the work for me. So let's take a quick poll. How many of you in this group use clinical notes templates? Let's take a quick poll on that. That is, how many of you have pre-written notes as part of your protocol? We'll give you 15 seconds to answer this, and we'll see what we got. There's 112 of you on, so we hope to get some pretty good response here.
Yep, I think we've gotten over 60%. I'll go ahead and close it and share that out.
Oh, I am thrilled to hear that. The cameras was less than I thought. This is way more than I thought. That is great news. Now, I'm going to show you some ways to refine that, but I need to give you my little warning. My little warning about this is it's a little time to set this up. Now, I personally set these up myself because I think I can write really pretty good comprehensive notes. My assistants have now learned how to use them, but they're not making too many additions. I'm doing most of the additions. So I'm going to give you a summary of this. Now, unfortunately, I can only show you one version of this, but if you've got notes templates, I want to make them better. For those of you who don't, 20% of you don't use those, I'm going to show you how this works. How would you like it if you could put this in your notes at 2 clicks? So these are things that we do. The front office does the first paragraph, and the back office does the second paragraph. And now for COVID, we have to do that for every patient. So I don't want to have to spend any time typing this. So I've got 2 clicks and boom, it's in the notes. How would you like it? For example, here's my little protocol. Now, if you'll notice, this is under my category of standard procedures. I made that section myself. I just edited it in, standard procedures, and I've used this as I've created as many templates as I could get. And I'll show you some of those as we go along. But notice the top two are front desk COVID protocol and COVID pre-op procedures. GP at the end is just what I put in to let them know that I put these in. That's Gates Parker. And so anyway, if you look down there, there's a single composite filling note. There's multiple composites notes. Down below in the next section, I have crown prep with a scan, which we use mostly, crown prep with impressions, and then cementing the crown. All of those are procedures that are all pre-done with templates. I have Invisalign visit with IPR, one with no IPR, standard implant surgery, multi-implant surgery, implant crown. These are all the ones that I've created that we use over and over again. And when I use them, if I see that there's something I can improve, I'll tweak it. So I'm constantly trying to make them better and more efficient, realizing that there's big payoff in the end for that. How would you like it if you could click on the tooth surface and never have to type out mesiolingual? You do it once and they're all there. So I have a long list of surfaces. I can click those and boom, it's done. Mesiobuccal, mesiolingual, distobuccal, distolingual, it's all done. How would you like it if you could make 6 clicks and you would be able to do an anesthetic paragraph that you use 3 different anesthetics? This is what mine says. We applied topical anesthetic in preparation for the anesthesia. I only have to type that once. We do that 100% of the time. We use the following anesthetics: CNS plain, which I always use first, always. Articaine, which I use sometimes, 2 carpules in this case. Lignospan, which I use third, most frequently. I did 3 carpules in this. An aspirating safety syringe was used to avoid intravascular injection. The patient tolerated the injection, had no reverse reactions to the anesthetic. Now I've got a typo there where I put and instead of an aspirating. So the next time I go into my notes, I will refine that. I'll tweak that so that that's more correct. Okay, now here's how we do that. I have one box, one template for types of anesthetic. Look how easy this is. So I have, what if I use 1 anesthetic? What if I use 2 types? What if I use 3 types? What if I use 4 types? So in this case, I go like this. I type 3 anesthetics. Sit nest is always on the top. Now, how many did I use? Articaine's on the top. And now I push use. I use 2. And then now, because it's the same list in a different order, and how many did I use? Paragraph that's very comprehensive that shows that I don't have to write about the topical anesthetic and I don't have to write about the aspirating safety syringe. You can have as much text as you want. Now, you might want to take some time in a team meeting to tweak the ones you use the most. You may not be the best writer in your office, or you can take these off of online and find someone that did or borrow mine. But this makes it so easy. I've never in my career used 5 different types of anesthetic on one patient, so I have no need for that, but I changed the order in every one of those. Okay, now, here is what was templated when I bought the system. 3 little things: anesthetic specific tooth, local anesthetic brief, and no injections given to the patient. That's what came with the package. I didn't write those, but I didn't need those. I haven't once used any of those 3, but I added in 1 type of anesthetic, 2, 3, and 4. Then those are the 3 you saw just a second ago. And then my hygienist, whose name is Gita, she put in ones. So she's got her own hygiene protocol, and she has 5 of those that she put in: lidocaine, articaine, citinest, ceticaine, and ultracaine. And so she can click those in. I didn't touch those. The hygienist all did those. Look below that, we've got a whole section on shade. Below that, we've got hygiene, endo, fixed. Now I'm going to show you that once you put those lists in, you just have to label them. So in this box, I have 100 different templates already prepared. The one that says CCFD on the end are the ones that I did myself. So all the other ones were ones that somebody else did. So now take a look as I scroll through this. You can see there's lengths, there's tongue habits. You see all those different ones. There's one for my anesthetic, and the lists are all the local anesthetic did you use as the prompt, and I have the same change the order. So anesthetic local sit nest at the top, number 2 articaine at the top, and span at the top, so that every one of it's going to be at the top unless there was some weird thing that happened. Okay, so that shows you how there's the same menu, and I can watch when I scroll down all the four canal length. This is my section on shape, but on that tooth, when I send that to the lab, there's the gingival one. You get the idea. Let me move to the next one. Now you're going to have to write your text, which is on the left there. So on the top, you see on the top of the box, it says providers. See where it says providers, and there's a tilde before and after it. That means that that's where the computer is going to want to know who is the provider. Was it Dr. Gates? Was it Dr. Parker? Then we reviewed the health history, prepared to seat crown on, and then we click that, and the option comes up. You'll see that in a second. Were they sensitive? They need to be numbed? If so, I'm going to do anesthetic. And then my paragraph says, cleaned off all temporary cement and pumice the tooth. Tried in the crown. Margins verified with the Explorer and sealed. Contact and occlusion checked with floss and articulating paper. Then if I make an adjustment, where did I adjust? Then I showed the patient crown of approval, the patient approved. So my list of information is on these ones on the right, the providers, the tooth number, whether it was sensitive, where I adjusted, which cement I used, how long did it set, and what were my post-op instructions, and who wrote the notes. That's so clean, so comprehensive, and so easy. Now I can put whole sentences in there. Check this out. The crown was adjusted occlusally. The crown was adjusted interproximally. The crown was adjusted lingually. You can put any version there, and then one click, and that sentence goes in. That's listed under this adjustment one, occlusal adjust crown, which you see, I'll show you with my mouse right there. And that's what the choices were that was under edit. Okay, or I can have things like primary cord was removed before seating the temporary crown. Primary cord was removed after seating the temporary crown. My assistants always want to pull the cord first and then seat the temporary. I want to have that cord in there until after the cement is cleaned off, and I pull it out last because then I don't leave any garbage in the sulcus. It's very clean. I do that all the time. They don't like to do that. So we have each of those choices, or plural. Primary cords were removed from seating the temporary crown. Primary cords were removed after seating the temporary crown. So there you can see those. Now you also see here, there's a place for anesthesia, which I have to use a separate menu for because it's more complicated. And then the shade, I use a separate menu for that. Let's see if we can watch and see how the whole thing gets put together here. And you can see how quick and easy this goes, okay? So we'll do the front there procedures, click. There's the back desk. Now I'm going to do an impression on this one. So it asks me the tooth. It is. Now what's the problem with abfraction? Sorry, let's try that again. Off you go. Okay. And then X-ray, we did both. So exposure. Click on that. Build up material. Couple sentences in there. Click on Luxitemp. How long do we let it sit? 5. Impression myself, the primary cord was removed before seating the temporary crown, removed after that was set. Verbal instruction, click that, and then by Dr. Gates. Boom, there it is. And the anesthesia. Now the anesthesia, I go, and then
Dr. Gates, I think we're having some problems with the animation causing your sound to cut out. So we're missing some of what you're saying, but we are also coming up to the end of our time. So we probably want to just try to wrap it up. For those of you who are here today, Solution Reach would love to do an offer for a demo for a $75 Amazon gift card. We didn't quite get a chance to talk about how you can share some of these innovations with your patients, but Dr. Gates and many other providers use and recommend Solution Reach for doing patient communication. There are a multitude of ways that you can promote the services that you have, promote new services, engage patients, share information with them, both educational and marketing. And we would love to show you how that all works. We also do obviously have a whole platform of solutions around reducing no-shows and increasing recall, online scheduling, and many other features. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can sign up at this link, which is solutionreach.com/webinar-offer-gates. Also, as you're exiting out of the webinar today, there is a quick survey that just asks you 3 questions. Anyone who answers that survey will get entered in a drawing for a pair of AirPods. So we really value that feedback about how our webinars are, what kinds of topics you'd like to see in the future, and whether or not you want someone from Solution Reach to follow up with you. So please, as you're exiting out, complete that survey, and we will drop you into that drawing. So we have reached our time, and I do want to make sure that we are respectful of how busy everyone is. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Gates, for presenting. I hope that people found this to be really an informational presentation. We appreciated having you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you again, everyone. We hope to see you at webinars again in the future. We look forward to providing you with useful educational resources. Please stay safe out there, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.